Welcome to a special edition of the Emerging Civil War podcast. I'm Chris Mikowski, and joining me today from the National Museum of Civil War Medicine is Director of Interpretation Dana Shoaf and Director of Marketing and Communications Melissa Winn. Good friends of mine. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So you guys have a wicked cool exhibit that you have just opened. Timing out with Nurses History Month, and it's about Civil War nurses. Dana, tell us a little bit about what you guys have going on.
Well, Melissa really did the bulk of the work on this, but getting it set up and everything. But we just opened this up a week ago in our Clara Barton Missing Soldiers office in Washington, D.C. And it's exhibit in collaboration with Ron Coddington of Military Images magazine. And we have images of 20 Civil War nurses. They were originally all in a CDV format and full standing. And we've reproduced those images. They're 6 feet tall, just a little bit larger than life size, and attached, labels on these images with the biographies of the individual nurses, so that when you go there, you'll be able to look these women in the eye and learn about what they did during the Civil War. The cool thing is that many of these women are relatively unknown to the general public. Clara Barton is not in this exhibit, even though it's in the office in which she did her humanitarian work. So there's a lot of women that are obscure, and that makes it even a little more interesting, I think. We also have people like Mary Tepe, which is French Mary, the Vivandier, who also nursed, and Harriet Tubman is in there as well. But we opened it and we had a really fantastic reception to the opening. We had a really great turnout, full room of people to hear a couple speakers and to learn about some of these women, and then to go around and check them out.
So now, Melissa, you're a photo person. Every time you and I have spoken about this exhibit, you've been super excited. You got me super excited about it. I'm not surprised that a photography project has you this excited. Tell me a little bit about why it's been so particularly exciting for you.
Well, particularly, the stories about these women have been, really great to be able to tell and share for people who might not know about them. I really, even thinking about just one of them, Helen Gilson, she's, she ends up being sick at the end of the war, and 2 years later dies in childbirth because she never really recovers. So these women really gave everything for this cause as well. And it was just really important for us to tell their stories. And I think the most interesting aspect is how, they really have a presence in this space at Clara Barton Missing Soldiers office. When Ron Coddington and I went down to the space to initially sort of come up with the concept for the exhibit, it's a very large, the Missing Soldiers office space is very large, tall ceilings, and it's got its own real sort of evocative feel. So we didn't want them to get lost in the space. And so that's how they became 6 feet tall. We were standing there, we had some examples of photographs that were matted from a previous exhibit that Ron had done, Faces of Freedom, and they were all sort of dwarfed by the space. So seeing them there, and that was really sort of how we came up with, no, they have to be bigger, and you have to feel their presence. And they do. When you see the exhibit in its space right now, they're 6 feet tall, there's many of them, there's 20 of them, and you feel like you walk right up to them and you're in their space too. And we have their stories attached to the images. Just, small brief write-ups, telling these stories of who they were and why they are representative of more than 20,000 women who volunteered for this service to treat wounded and dying soldiers. And their stories are very special. And it's really important and unique exhibit. And I feel really proud that we're able to tell their story.
Melissa, if you don't mind me asking sort of a nerdy technical question. So we tend to think of Civil War photography, if they're on glass plates, you have super, super high resolution. But Dana mentioned that these come from CDVs, so maybe a uh, less of a resolution. Did it pose technical problems blowing them up so big when you didn't have quite that resolution to work with?
A little bit. I mean, they were, some of them, have a little bit of less, they're not really bad quality. They're very, very well done. We worked with the printer actually at Hood Printing, in Frederick. And he paid really close attention to it. We actually went there a couple times to look at, go through some proofs with him. He paid real careful attention to the tone and the sharpness of the quality. So
Yeah.
we're really happy with the quality of the imagery that came out. And at being 6 feet tall, I think everybody will be surprised too how great they really
Yeah,
look.
sometimes when you blow something up that big, you lose resolution. But with all the technology available now, he was able to keep it sharp and crisp. And they're very impressive
Yeah,
reproductions of the original CDVs. In some cases, they're a little cleaner and sharper than the originals because he didn't Photoshop them. He just kind of made sure everything was, nice, precise definition. So they're not blurry at all. They're very clean and
Yeah.
clear. Yeah.
That's wicked cool. And again, it's a super nerdy question. I apologize.
No,
That's
it's
fine.
okay. So, we went over to see them being printed and they were on this big horizontal flat printer being printed on the actual size. It was really impressive to see them printed.
Yeah, each one of them took between 20 and 40 minutes
Yeah.
to print.
Yeah.
Just on this high-powered laser printer
Yeah.
that he had. And
Yeah.
it was neat to just even see that in process.
Right.
And again, he paid real close attention to the tone, making sure that, the quality of the photos didn't get lost
Yeah.
because of how
And
large they were.
And the other compelling thing about this exhibit is that these women represent a social revolution.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Because before the Civil War, women are forbidden by cultural, requirements, if you will, to work and serve in hospitals. It's too indelicate for women. They might see men in a naked state. No, there's no nurses training schools in the United States before the Civil War. Now, these women are not nurses like we necessarily think of nurses. Nurses have complex responsibilities today. A lot of what these women did was caregiving, feeding the soldiers, changing bandages, that sort of thing. But still, for them to go from where they were in their women's sphere into these hospitals, where they're not just seeing ill people, they're seeing shot up soldiers, missing body parts, and do this work. It's a huge change. They estimate 20,000 women did this. And, when I went to the museum, it's been since November 2023. Melissa's been there a shorter amount of time than myself, but one of the first things that I think compelled me and her both is the stories. They're not that different from the soldiers. They're volunteers. They're the same age bracket, somewhat older, in many cases, and they see just about every horrible thing that the soldiers see, with the exception of being shot at. But they see the gore, the death, the dismemberment, and some of these women suffer from PTSD.
yeah.
Some of them
absolutely.
end the war extremely ill.
Yeah.
Some of them die shortly after the war from lingering illnesses, just like the soldiers. It's really something when you start learning about what they did and experienced.
Melissa, how do you go from, 20,000 nurses to picking 20 stories to highlight?
So, of course, Ron Coddington played a huge role in that. He did actually produce a book called Faces of Civil War Nurses, which this exhibit is based on. And
Which
that,
we had for sale at the opening and went
Yeah.
like zip, zip,
yep,
zip.
we sold out of the book. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was really a great, you couldn't ask for a better opening of the exhibit. Absolutely. So he had a large role, of course, in telling many of the stories. He knew a lot of these stories because of the format actually that we use they are standing 6 feet tall, full size, figures, that actually did dictate some of who we could include and who we could not. Some people we only had facial portraits, and we just couldn't include some of those pictures. Though, in fact, one of them really, Susie King Taylor, was somebody we were considering including, an African-American nurse that we do have an image of and know her story, but her image wasn't, it's not full size foot to head, so we couldn't include it. So that format did limit us in some of our, but really, even in this format, we had more stories than we could tell, and we knew we had to cut and trim. So it was a tough Sophie's choice type of editing of some of the stories. If we could include more, we definitely would, but we tried to really represent, you know, different women's stories and keep different, you know, some of these were women of faith, some of them were, you know, we have some Confederate nurses, you know, we tried to keep.
We have Union Confederates, some are Quaker women, some are recent immigrants to the United States, some are grandmothers, some are young and haven't had children yet. There's a wide range of women here.
We tried to represent lots of different stories with the 20 stories that we were able to include.
Very cool. Now, a lot of people don't realize the Clara Barton Missing Soldiers Office is part of the National Museum of Civil War.
I was just going to get to that. We need to talk about that.
So fill us in, Dana.
Well, Clara Barton Missing Soldiers Office is on 7th Street in DC. And of course, our main museum is in Frederick, Maryland, the National Museum of Civil War Medicine. But we also administer this site in DC that was a location of Clara Barton's, it was the nerve center for her humanitarian efforts during the Civil War. That's where she lived and she based her work out of there. It was originally, it was on the 3rd floor of a brick building, and it was a series of boarding houses. She basically rented one side of this 3rd floor. And then we think, because the records are not, you know, extant for it, but we think she took down the walls to create one big room out of a number of boarding rooms, and then left one small boarding room for herself to stay in. And then out that big room was sort of where she stored her supplies, et cetera, et cetera. And then she would journey out to the battlefields from there. She had a friend that rented there as well named Edward Shaw, and his room is interpreted as well. He boarded there. He was kind of like, he didn't own the place, but he was the head boarder that reported to the owner if there were anything that needed fixed. He also worked with Clara in the patent office where she worked. So he would cover her work and her shifts when she went out to the battlefields.
Yeah.
And then after the war, that is where she ran the Missing Soldiers Office, trying to reunite families or help families find their missing soldiers, primarily Union, that were killed somewhere in the fighting and never came home. And she would try to help find the location of those burials or what happened to their loved ones.
Yeah.
She closed up shop there in 1868.
Before that, she received more than 63,000 letters from people looking for soldiers and missing relatives.
Yeah.
And she found
Yeah.
more than 22,000 of them.
So the site is very
Yeah.
compelling in its own right. You know, she said address queries to room 9, and the door with the 9 on it and the mail slot where those queries came in is still there.
Yeah.
Her little room is still there. And the attic above it was found full of stuff that was from her work there that was just shoved up there, like the metal signs that were on the doors, Missing Soldiers Office, all sorts of cool stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really Daniel tells it better than I do, so I'll let him tell it. But the story of the discovery of it is really interesting.
I'll tell you very quickly the story. Richard Lyons was the name of this gentleman who worked for the General Services Administration. Of course, the sort of the landlords of the federal government in DC, General Services Administration. So this building was slated to be torn down in the late 1990s. And he was sent there as a GSA employee to go through it, give it a final check, make sure there were no vagrants or homeless in it, no explosive propane tanks, etc., and then get the thing sealed off permanently so that no one else could get in there. He was up doing this inspection. Now this, at the time, it's a ruin in a sense. The plaster's off the walls. There's no lighting in there. It's dark. Just the natural light coming in from the windows is all that's there. He was on the 3rd floor in what we believe were 100%, almost 100% sure was her room where she stayed. And he heard a noise out on the street. He went to the window to see what caused this noise, like a car stopping abruptly. And he thought someone tapped him on the shoulder. And so he stops and he turns around. Of course, no one's there. He kind of is looking around. He looks up at the ceiling, and out of this ruined ceiling, he sees this envelope, like a letter hanging there. And he gets a stick or something. He gets it down, and it's addressed to Edward Shaw. And he's like, "What's this?" And so he's looking again, and he sees a small opening, like attic opening in the ceiling. And he went and he got a ladder, put this ladder up, and he goes up the ladder and he's padding around up in this attic space. And he felt something like metal, and he gets a hold of it, he pulled it out, and it's this marvelous hand-painted sign, Clara Barton, Missing Soldiers Office, Room 9. And he's like, whoa, because he knew who Clara Barton was. And so he started a covert email operation. He didn't want to get fired. So he got an email account set up as Edward Shaw. And he got some preservationists interested in a local news channel who came down to do a story about this. Long story short from there, it wasn't demolished. And it was the GSA restored it. And then we began to run it in 2015. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It opened in July of 2015.
yeah, but a lot of the items are, some of the items are in display in our Frederick Museum, and many of the other items that were found there are now on display in the Missing Soldiers Office itself.
Yeah,
Cool. So Melissa, do you want to give a pitch for folks to come on down and see the exhibit?
absolutely. In fact, I will show you, this is our exhibit catalog and just a little sneak peek into some of these stories. These are some of the images that we've blown up, and these are some of their stories in here. And this, we have catalogs for with the exhibit. You come down to see the exhibit.
We gave 100 away the day of the opening.
Yeah, absolutely. We had about 100, little close to 100 people show up.
Those catalogs are free when you come down to see the exhibit.
Yeah, so the Clara Barton Missing Soldiers Office Museum is open every Friday and Saturday from 11 to 5 p.m. And this exhibit is up now. It will be there until September 1st. And after that, it will come out to Frederick. But go see it in its inaugural spot, please. It's a really neat space in general. And the exhibit is just, it's very moving and powerful to see these nurses there.
And a quick shout out to Civil War Images magazine or military
Images,
Images.
absolutely.
Military Images magazine, and Ron
Yes,
Coddington
absolutely.
and Ron, we worked hand in hand on this, and he's been great to work with. And we hope to work with him in the future on similar exhibits like this. So
Fantastic. Well, Dana, Melissa, thanks for spending a little time explaining to us the cool stuff you have going on right now.
thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us on. We appreciate it very much, Chris. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm Chris Mikowski for the Emerging Civil War podcast. We'll see you online and on the battlefield.